Okay, I am going to mute everyone. You can always unmute if you are not familiar with Zoom. You can unmute your individual line. We do try to keep these fairly interactive, and I'll leave time for questions at the end. So feel free to save them up, and you can always ask at the end as well. But since we have some new faces on the line that haven't been on these calls before, I'll give you kind of like an intro into this 6-week series and what exactly that we're doing. So this is a call series that we do to train our team, our Isogenics team. We always do them on Monday nights, but we thought it would be fun to do for the end of the year a series called Finish Strong. And it's really geared toward, as entrepreneurs, I know all of us are business owners, getting our minds and our actions, our habits aligned with where we want our business to be at the end of the year, and having a chance to check in once a week, which we do these on Mondays, to do that accountability check and make sure that as the year gets busier, as we get into the holiday season, we are staying consistent with the things that are really going to make a difference and set us up for success in the new year in our businesses. So I have been loving the series so far. We've touched on a couple of awesome topics. First week was on vision, how to create a vision that pulls you forward, where you don't need to motivate yourself to do the work. It's your vision pulling you forward. So we did that the first week. The second week, we talked all about your financial mindset, how to really work on that, how to grow a more abundant mindset so that it can support these huge goals that you have for your business. So if you are interested in either of those two call recordings and you didn't hear those calls, I'm happy to send them. And then tonight, we are talking about sales. And I want to start by sharing, for those of you who haven't heard my story, or I guess some of the background on me, I was in sales. That was my first, I always joke, my first like big girl job. And I was in sales for a commercial flooring manufacturer. And I lived in fear daily of my boss finding out how bad I really was at sales, because I was so afraid to ever make someone feel uncomfortable. I was afraid of coming across as pushy. So I was the least effective salesperson that probably ever lived. Anyone else relate to just those fears of feeling afraid of putting yourself out there, afraid of being pushy, all of the above? I figure that's probably why a lot of you are on the call tonight. However, we do know that in order for people to learn about the incredibly valuable things that we are all creating, which everyone on this call is creating or offers something that is highly, highly valuable, we know that in order to get that information in front of people, you've got to have sales. Like that's it. And sometimes I don't love how in certain industries they'll be like, oh, you don't sell, you just share. No, let me tell you, the most effective way to have people's lives change by what you're offering is to master sales. So my goal at the end of our conversation tonight is to have all of us feel a whole lot more confident around just owning the fact that it's okay to be great at sales. Being great at sales does not mean that you are going to pressure people into buying something they don't want or they don't need. Being great at sales is the best service you can offer people. Because I really want you to get this. If you offer something of high value that can make a legitimate difference in someone else's life, if you are not selling it to them, or educating them about it and asking them to become a customer, to do business with you, to allow you to impact their life, you are actually doing people a disservice. And when I really got clear about that I was being more stingy by not offering people a solution to the real challenges they were experiencing, that is when I started to slowly, and let me tell you, this was not overnight, it was slow, but I slowly started to gain the confidence to practice more and therefore had much, much better results in terms of sales. So if that sounds like something any of you would be interested in, you can just like pop a little comment in the chat box. And I also would love if you would share, those of you who can, I want you to share what exactly it is that you are selling. So because I want to get a sense, I know for most of you what it is, but are you selling a product, a service? I know Cindy is planning an event, so eventually you'll be selling, the tickets to your event. So just give us an idea for those who are on the conversation tonight, what the range of products, services we all are offering. Because then I'll kind of tailor it, and as I pull in some examples, we'll use the examples from, right from this group. But I'd love to hear from one or two of you. Does that give you a different perception of what it is that you are doing when you think of sales, to actually flip the script that you're doing people a disservice by not selling it to them? Does anyone else, is that completely opposite from how you've thought about it in the past? Because that rocked my world. And you can unmute. You can actually talk. You don't have to just type it in the chat.
I've heard you say that before, Lindsay, so it's not the first time I've heard you say it. Sorry, I'm a little sick. But I think it's been ingrained because you hear so much sales is bad, or it's like the car salesman, or, there's such a negative connotation to it that it's hard to get out of my head that I'm doing the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
So good. Yes. I feel like there are a lot of heads nodding with that. Anyone else, does that kind of challenge what you've always thought or believed about sales?
Totally, for me. I'm hiding my face because you don't want to see this.
You are so fine.
But I'm Cindy. This is Cindy talking. But yeah, totally for me, because Lindsay, I'm so afraid of coming off salesy and making people uncomfortable, even though I'm told over and over again that my product has value and people love it. I'm still very much in that space of they'll come to me if they're interested. I'm not going to push it on anybody. Mm-hmm. And I'm slowly learning that there's a correlation between how much I'm talking about my services and what I offer and how many clients I have. Because the more I talk about my services, even in a non-salesy way, just talking about what I do, the more people are contacting me. But I try to be so hands off because I don't want to annoy people that it affects me negatively when it comes to sales. It just does. It's crazy.
Amen, sister. Yes, I have been there. I still find myself there from time to time. So you're in good company. Anyone else want to chime in before we dive into the goods?
Hi. I love, Cindy, how you're poking out of the side, by the way.
I know.
So I am selling Isogenics, and I've been using the product forever. And before I actually started selling it, which has only been a very short amount of time, I got all my friends to use it and try it with no problem because I was just so excited about it and it worked for me. But the minute I started selling it, I felt like I had to tell them I was selling it. And then that gave me so many reservations. They thought that I just wanted to make money off of them. So I think it's my own mind block that I'm just trying to get by. But it is different and scary once you feel like, you really just worry about what they think, right? So that's really the big hurdle for me to get over.
Yes. Okay. That I could not have had someone share, I think, the more perfect segue, because what you said nailed it. How we can so easily share about things that we love when there's nothing in it for us to gain. But the moment there's a transaction involved, we start to have these concerns that people are going to think we're ingenuine. When truthfully, and I'm saying this from my own personal experience, when truthfully there's no difference between when I'm sharing something that I love, recommending a product. I can think of 1,000 of them. I always use the example of my eyelash extensions because I love the girl that I go to. So it's very easy for me to recommend that to someone. But once I switched from something that was just a genuine referral to I could be compensated for a referral, I made it weird. I'm just going to say that. I made it super weird. So what we're going to talk about tonight is just some simple things that each of us can start to notice when we're in a conversation, and we're just going to call any conversation about what you do and what you offer is a potential sales conversation. And I think the first step to owning the fact that sales is a valuable service is to just own it, to do exactly that, to not shy away from admitting that, like, yeah, I'm selling something. I am selling something that I truly believe in. Now, if you're selling something you don't believe in, then absolutely stop doing that, because that is not the conversation we're having tonight, but that doesn't apply to anyone who's watching live right now. So what I thought would be most helpful when I really thought about my journey from the mental piece of being able to own the fact that I was proud to be selling something, going from being totally scared and making it really weird. And I'll give you some really hilarious examples. Maybe you can resonate with some of them, but some hilarious examples of my own transformation in verbiage I used, the mindset that I had behind some of these, and just start to point out the places where I realized I had blind spots. And then at the end, we can totally dive in. We can have some Q&A, or we could do some role playing or whatever it is around whatever particularly you sell. But we're going to just do a general overview to kick it off. And one of my favorite things to do is have people, I think Cindy will remember this, we did a small group business mastermind. And especially when we are new at offering a product or service, there tends to be this learning curve, this growth curve that we go through in us believing in ourselves, in selling that thing. Can anyone relate to that? You're like a new personal trainer and you're like, well, and it's just this lack of confidence that we can deliver the results that we hope we're going to be able to deliver. Same thing with me when I went from, well, I sell carpet for a living to, well, now I'm a health and wellness coach. And I had this, I've heard this term used, and I think it's perfect. I had imposter syndrome. Can anyone relate to that? Where I don't know if Christina is dialing in on the phone. We've talked about this. Like, Christina has the most rockin' bod ever. She's a super fit cycling instructor, and everyone wants to know what she does for her workouts. And then that shift between, I'm a cycling instructor to now I'm offering workouts, and yes, I can coach you, I can consult you, I can work with you. Sometimes it can have us feel like our mind just goes like, wait a minute. No, you're not. Oh, that's laughable. I had these awkward conversations with people where they would ask what I do for a living. And this could be like a total stranger that I'd meet at a networking event or et cetera. And they would ask, well, what do you do? And I'm like, in my mind, I'm going, this is perfect. This is like the perfect opportunity. Okay, here's my moment. I should tell them that now I'm doing, these health products. And I would be like, well, I sell carpet, but I also really am interested in health and fitness. And so I started this business, and all of a sudden I found myself just word vomiting, the verbal vomit, as we call it, all over them. And yes, I was excited, but there was this piece missing about just straight to the point, what it is that I do, and allowing them to even be curious or interested. Immediately this person is backpedaling and afraid they ever asked me what I do for a living. So there's this whole growth curve that we go through. But one of the quickest ways, and this is going back to Cindy, what I was mentioning that we did in our mastermind, is to explain what you do in the way that your best friend or your biggest cheerleader would explain what you do. So here's what I mean by that. Instead of being modest, being shy, downplaying the big impact you want to make, I want you to think about, or you could even use the reverse. So you could think about I think about how passionate I am about Cindy and how awesome her macro coaching is, her event is. I could talk about Cindy's event all day long. And then when someone asks me about mine, I'm like, oh yeah, no, it's just this thing that we do. So instead, switch it. So whether you want to pretend you're talking about a product or service of your friends that you believe in, you love, like you will be like their hype girl till the day you die, and then just insert your product. So how that could sound is, I could pretend I'm talking about Cindy's event, and I'd be like, you want to know about the Powerhouse Women event? Let me tell you, this day is going to be incredible. We're going to have amazing speakers. You're going to meet the most incredible women, and I would love for you to come. Now, saying that, especially that last line, which we'll talk about this at the end, actually asking someone to commit is the part usually where we get all wonky. But think about that from the standpoint of explaining what it is that you do. Think about it in the way that someone who loves and adores you would describe it. And try on the next time someone asks you, well, hey, tell me about what it is that you're doing, or I see that you started this new business, or what is this new product you've been sharing about? Share about it in a way that actually doesn't involve you, because that is usually where we go awry and where we make it real weird real quick. Because there's a part of us that wants to help and wants to serve people, but we don't want to come across as though we're trying to force an outcome, which deep down we aren't. We really do believe in what we're doing, but it's that fear of what other people will think that makes what happens in between, again, just really weird if you're me. So does that make sense? Explaining what you do in the way that you would either explain a best friend's product or service, or vice versa, in the way your best friend would describe what it is that you do. Does that make sense?
Everyone needs to do this, because it made me cry when I did it.
Oh yeah, oh that's right, it did.
It made me cry, yeah. So I'm going to do it again, and it'll probably make me cry again.
Yes. And it's such a great exercise to go through and notice. And here's the other thing, notice what part feels uncomfortable. Even as I'm doing that example for you guys, there's like still a part in me that feels a little weird, like talking about how amazing something that I'm doing is. And there's nothing wrong with that. We don't want to like judge ourselves. There's just a part of us that still, at least for me, I'll just talk about me personally, I struggle with this because I innately am a recovering people pleaser. So I'm more concerned, if I'm honest, when I'm feeling that way, I'm more concerned about what people will think of me than I am about impacting their life. Otherwise, it wouldn't feel weird. So there's nothing for me to do with it other than to be like, okay, what am I really here for? And this actually lends to number 2. So these are like if I were to give you like the quick tips for what's going to make the biggest impact in your ability to sell with confidence. Number 1 is, start explaining it in the way your best friend would. Number 2 is if I have the opportunity. So this is more when I know I'm going to be getting on a call with someone and we're going to be talking about either, my health coaching business, or maybe my event, maybe it's the Powerhouse Girl Gang, whatever it is. I will first, if I have the opportunity, knowing I'm going to go into a conversation like this, sit down, and if I have a chance, I'll write a list, or I can just do it mentally. I will think about this person specifically and get so present to what impact what I'm offering could make in their life. So for example, like when I'm coaching someone around their health and fitness, and we're going to be getting on a call to discuss their goals, I will first sit down, and sometimes even just to get like really connected to it, I'll look at their Facebook, I'll look at their Instagram, I'll see that they're a busy parent. I'll just really start to think, man, okay, if I was running around with 2 kids, I bet like it's probably pretty tough to stop and eat a nutritious meal. Man, I bet it would just make such a difference if this mom like had something convenient and had the energy to keep up with her kids and just felt like she was able to be more present, right? So like I sit and I paint such a clear picture about the best possible outcome. So like, and Cindy, I'm just going to use the example of your event again. So like for you, and we've talked about this, like, what do you envision women coming out of this event are going to be saying and thinking? Like they come up to you with like tears in their eyes and they're just like, this changed my life because, and you just let your mind wander. Now notice what we're doing. Okay. So be honest, how many of you, just like I have done, will go to the worst possible case scenario before you get on a sales phone call? you're like, oh God, what if I catch them in there in the middle of dinner? And you're thinking, no, you've had this call set up. Like if they're in the middle of dinner, that'd be weird because you set this time up. Or I'll be like, what if they had a really bad day? Oh my gosh, what if they hate me? What if they tell me I'm a terrible person? Like it gets dark sometimes. I'll be like, what if they tell me I'm like such a greedy person, and how dare I even suggest that I could help them achieve their goals? If you think about it, I don't know about any of you, and those of you who've been maybe pursuing your business for a while, have you actually ever had someone say, how dare you care about me and my life being better? Like really, who do you think you are to say that my life could be better and that you care about me? Never. In 9 years with my network marketing company in health and wellness, never have I had someone say, how dare you be concerned about my well-being and try to positively benefit my life. But that is where my mind goes, which puts me in a different kind of energy going into that conversation than if I do the other exercise where I think about the best possible scenario. And your energy is one of the most powerful tools that you have when you are going into a situation where you're going to be, essentially having an opportunity to offer your product or service, or like a sales situation. So how many of you honestly do that, where you paint like the worst case scenario? If you're not careful, your mind just defaults there. Yeah, that's called being human. So it takes something to harness the power of our imagination for good and play out the best case scenario, and have that in the back of your mind as you go into this conversation. So, and I'm just, if you see me looking off, it's because I have notes so that I don't get totally on a tangent, because I tend to go down rabbit holes. But what I wrote here is, sales is literally so much more about having great questions and being genuinely curious about like what's going on in this person's life, and almost like kind of listening for, well, how can I help them? Oh my goodness. Then having some perfect pitch or this script that you follow. Sales from the heart, which is what we're talking about, is legitimately just being curious about people. So the other thing I use when I go into a call and I notice like I'm just concerned, like I'm concerned about all the things we talked about. What are they going to think? Is it going to seem like I'm this or that? Do they have the money for it? Like it's like I worry about their bank account when that's like none of my business. I remind myself, I am just here to ask questions. And I promise you, especially if you really love and believe in what you're offering, if you ask a series of great questions and you're just leaning in and help, genuinely caring about how this problem or whatever the topic that you're talking about, which usually leads to like, hey, what's going on with you? Like, what have been some challenges that you're dealing with right now? Like, how is that impacting you? Oh man, like, and just really like being their friend, coming alongside of them and looking at whatever their struggle is with them, versus being the salesperson across the table. This is always like what I think about mentally, that's pitching something at them. So it's like in your mind, you just see yourself, it's like you're on both sides of the table, and you just get up from your seat and you walk around and you pull your chair up next to them and you're like, hey friend, yeah, no, let's talk about like what's really going on here. Because if you set that up and if you just genuinely have a conversation from that place, from how you can serve, you can never go wrong. Your heart it's not possible for them to perceive what you are asking and the conversation that you're having as anything but just being completely genuine and wanting to serve. And that gave me a whole lot of permission. So when I feel weird going into a sales conversation, I remember my one and only job is to be curious and ask great questions. And at the end, if we want to circle back to that, we can even talk about some of the questions that, that could be great for whatever product or service it is that you're offering. But that's the number one thing to remember, is that you are sitting on the same side of the table as them, asking great questions, looking at the problem, solving it with them, versus sitting across from the table pitching them something. Because I think that's what we tend to think of in our mind when we think of sales. And that's actually that's not like the real way to do sales. Okay, was that good? Does that help? Number 2? Great. So number 3, well, okay, I put this as like a sub number 2. I'm like, we'll just throw it in here. So this is something that we have always used within our network marketing team, within our, health and wellness focused business and this truly came from a place of, I want people to know whether or not they are a fit for what it is that I'm offering, which in this case is like, a health program, whether or not they are a fit for that, or if it's the right time for them. I always want to have something to offer them that is totally free of charge. And what I think this does is it starts to take down people's barriers that you're just in it to sell them something. Otherwise you're like, they're dead to you. So we achieve this in a really easy way. We have just a private Facebook community where we give out all free resources. So we do share a little bit about like the specific health program that we use. And I always let people know that. So like how this would sound is like Liz and I maybe we're talking about her goals. She's like, you know what, Lindsay, like just not going to be a fit for right now. Like, let's talk after the holidays, whatever it is. I'm like, hey, cool. Now you know what it is that, we're up to over here. And like, we can just totally set that aside until you're ready. But I don't want you to lose steam throughout the holidays. So if you're interested, we have a free Facebook group. We literally give away our best stuff for free. Why don't I just add you there? Like that way you can still have the support while you're, learning about this, seeing if it's a good fit, or just, waiting till the timing is right. And what I do is I want them to know I'm not just interested in them buying something. I'm genuinely interested in, like, if we're having a health conversation, then I say, like, I really want to see you achieve the goals like we just talked about. So, hey, this might be a good stepping stone. And whether or not you ever choose to join like the Isagenix part, cool. This is just there for you, totally free. And so whatever that is for you, you could come up with a free resource, a free guide. It could be, the other thing that I use is we came up with like just a really simple, very basic like meal planning guide. So it's kind of, I just put it together based on like how I eat, because a lot of times that's what people want. They just want a little bit of direction. So I just say like, hey, I have this free, it's like a Word doc. Do you want me just to send it over? Like, oh, if you're like struggling with putting meals together, maybe this is like really what you need. And I truly believe, and this goes back to our conversation last week about abundance mentality. This goes back to everything we're talking about in terms of selling from your heart and believing that the right people are going to find you and at the right time. So sometimes it really is just a not right now. Sometimes it's that maybe that's not the best fit for them. And I have to put my ego aside and just truly believe that the people who are right for what I'm doing are going to find me. And if I'm willing to open my mouth and talk about what it is that I'm doing, at least they'll have a chance to decide for themselves, yes or no. And then in the meantime, like I just really want, for me, it just feels good to have something that I can offer and truly show that I am invested in them more than I am my own bottom line or bank account. Is that good? So again, if you want ideas like specific to your what it is that you are promoting or selling, I'm totally happy to. It's like one of my favorite things to do is like brainstorm the bigger picture stuff. So if you need ideas for like what your free offering could be, would love to talk about that offline. And then so that was kind of like point 2, point 5. On the topic of just really being in it for them, like coming from a place of what's best for them. And then this number 3 is probably the hardest. This is the one where when I said practice, I had to practice this and be so bad at it, like laughably bad at it. And I promise we'll get some wine and share all the stories someday. But it's practicing the closing questions, meaning closing is where you ask for the business. You ask them to become your client. You ask them to make a purchase. How many of you, that's the worst part? That's like the part you just wish everyone would just sign up and say, like, here's my money. Like, can I please buy what you have to offer? Yeah, we all do. Like, we all wish it was just that easy. And sometimes it is. I promise you, like, once in a while, I was in an airport once and literally this guy was like, oh, Isagenix, I've heard of that. Like, hey, do you have like meetings where I could come and learn more? And I literally was looking around like, is this like candid camera? I was like, yeah. He's like, oh, and do you have some information to send me that I could like read about it? I literally was like, sure. So once in a while, like those people just kind of like really show up, and it is a matter of you were in the right place at the right time with the right serving heart, and you are able to really impact someone's life. And that guy did go on to lose like 60 pounds and his life has totally changed, which is awesome. So, but for 99.99% of those conversations, you get to be bold. And I mean this, you get to be bold enough to make a request and stand for the end result that you can visualize. So if you go into the conversation visualizing how different this person's life could be, then you kind of bring that full circle to the end. And you want to be prepared with a couple, maybe one or two that you just feel really comfortable delivering, some closing questions or phrases. And this goes back to the energy. Like the more times you practice this, the easier it gets, the more comfortable it feels, the less weird it'll maybe come across to them. But just know, you might feel weird for the first like 1, 2, or 100 times. And then there will come a time where you just really are able to like settle into what works for you. So closing questions or statements could be things like, hey, based on our conversations today, my recommendation to you would be, X, whatever, if you're, I know Shelly sells essential oils, we've got, health products, we've got, online coaching, whatever it is, like based on what we talked about, here is what I think is going to be best for you. And here's why. And this is the part where you've got to really notice where you want to overshare because you're afraid to ask the question. Really, this is like, I went from verbal vomiting on people to say like, this is the best solution to fit your needs based on what we talked about. And here's why. It comes in, and then I usually say, it's the investment is blah, 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 whatever the investment is. Based on what we talked about today, are you ready to give it a try? And this is the hardest part, the be quiet afterward. So what I used to do is something like, but if you can, or if you don't want to today, like that's fine. Or like, hey, you reach out to me. You come find me whenever you're ready. No pressure. And that is such a disservice to people. Because you know what? We are the ones that can visualize. We can see the pathway to the results that they want and how we know their life can be impacted. Back to what we started this conversation saying, we are doing them a disservice if we don't boldly ask them to take an action that will start them toward that new future. Now they can do with it whatever they want. We are fine with yes or no, or hey, I have some more questions, or whatever comes in between. But this is like literally scratching the surface of just the 3 most basic things that could, and I believe will, start to drastically change the results that you're getting. It sounds so simple, but you have to ask for the sale. You just have to ask them to get started, and then zip it. And don't fill the space until they say something. Anyone else like cringe at the thought of that? If it sounds terrible, it is. Especially if you really like don't love silence, trust me.
I almost love it.
It will. Okay, Liz loves it, and probably because maybe you've practiced it more than the average person, or and some people are totally good with that, but it was the hardest thing in the world for me in the beginning. Now I do love it. I'm so with you, because they might just be thinking in their mind, like, they're going through their own process. And sometimes if we go to fill the space too quickly after making that request, or, asking the question, or sometimes you can phrase it as a statement like, this is absolutely going to rock your world, and I'm excited for you to get started. Like, well, I guess usually I do, Usually it is a question, like, hey, are you ready to get started, right? And if you can learn to not want to fill that silence, you will notice that sometimes people just have like this mental process going on that brings them to their yes or to their question. Versus if I would jump to fill it, you can sometimes end up talking people out of it. You know, people more than anything, when they're, you know, having a discussion with you about a challenge they're having that you could potentially solve, they number one are looking for your certainty. And I want you to think about this. When you have, think about maybe like the last purchase you made. Maybe it was one that was a little bit like made you uncomfortable, like with the price, or I want you to think about the last time like you invested at a higher level than you normally do in something for yourself, for your business. And I actually want you to go back to that conversation. The person who, you know, sold you, I'm using air quotes, if you think about it, right? They said some things. You said, here's my money. I want you to look in that conversation at the level of certainty and how it made you feel. Because in delivering the final question, you know, the closing question, in delivering everything we've talked about, the number one thing, your number one tool to being more confident in sales is continuing to develop your level of certainty that your product or service can provide the result someone wants. Does that make sense? So how certain you are on a scale of like 1 to 10 is going to influence how certain they feel about making that investment. And then now if you think back through some of the things that we've talked about, when we downplay how awesome our products or services are, rather than explain them like a best friend, or when we focus on, oh, are they thinking something weird about me? Like, look, if I'm focused on that, I'm focused on me. I'm not at all focused on them, nor am I very certain if I'm concerned about how this is going to make me look. Lack of certainty. And if we aren't able to ask the person to get started, it actually plants doubt in their minds when we say something like, hey, just think about it and get back to me. Versus, Liz, sister, it is your time. You are ready, and I am ready for you. Let's do this. Are you ready? Are you ready to get started?
Here's my money.
If she says no, even if she says no. Now, let's say she says no to me. I'll say, you know, this is like a whole other conversation around handling objections or questions, but how many of you know that even just looking for where to insert more certainty and be willing to ask a question, ask the closing question, and just zip it might have a dramatic result on your end results? Anyone want to share on any of the above? I'm like tired of hearing my own voice at this point. What are you seeing differently? What are you hearing differently? You don't have to say anything to make me feel good. I just really want to know if this is like resonating and if it's helpful.
Well, I can tell you, I totally do that. I always do. I like get rid of the silence quick. Like, or my favorite is to do it over email because then there is no silence.
Oh, yeah.
It's so embarrassing to even admit.
No. Oh my goodness. Anyone else in that same camp? You'd rather
because it's
email or?
Oh my gosh. But yeah, I totally do that. Like I don't even realize that I do it until you point it out. I totally close the silence.
It takes one to know one.
But you're so right, because if I was trying to buy something, like you were thinking what made me uncomfortable. Okay, we just recently bought a golf cart. So silly. It has nothing to do with my business, but it's an extra expense that's unnecessary. I could live without it, right? Just like most of our stuff is. People would survive without it. It's an extra thing. So, but the guy was like the most aggressive mofo on the planet. Like he was so like, but he knew, like he was one of those people that you almost like, just like were so reassured by what he was saying and the way he was handling it that you didn't even feel like you needed to ask questions because he was so confident in the way that he was explaining the whole thing. And, but yeah, I do that all the time. Like, so anyways, I was thinking if he would have been like, yeah, I'm not really sure. My husband would have been like, we're out of here. This guy doesn't even know what he's talking about. Like, you know, but Yeah, I do. I do that every single time. I totally want to make people super comfortable. I don't want them to feel like they have to commit. And without knowing it, I've been sending vibes of uncertainty in my own self. So that was huge for me to hear.
Here, here. And we all, I mean, I still catch myself doing it. I will have some days where I am a rock star and I'm like, I'm changing lives left and right. And other days where I'm like, why am I such a weirdo? Like, that was terrible. That was terrible. So I love that. And yeah, now you're like, I own a golf cart. Do I need a golf cart? But this guy was so certain I needed one. Now I own one. Can't even be mad at him. I love that. Anyone else?
When you were talking about certainty, it's not the first time I've heard you talk about this. I've heard other people talk about this, and I need to keep hearing it because that's something that I know that I struggle with. And, you had asked early on, what are you selling? I have been using Isagenix products for 4 years, something like that. And I really was interested originally in particularly being a health coach focusing on Isagenix solely, but I didn't feel authentic in selling it because I didn't look like I used it, and now that I've lost 75 pounds and, I have a lot more to go, but people are starting to ask, what are you doing? Like, how do you lose 80 pounds in 8 months? Like, what the heck are you doing? And this is exactly when I needed to hear this because now I feel authentic in my responses to them. I am happy about it. I know that it works. I can show that it works. And it's mind-boggling how different and how more confident I am talking about it now than I did a year ago.
So true.
And it's simply because of the certainty piece.
And I'm really proud of you, and this goes for everyone. If you notice that you're like, man, okay, I'm still not able to like come across with complete certainty. Again, this is not validation for your worst fears that maybe you're not good at what you're doing. That's a place to just get curious and go like, okay, how could I increase my certainty? Like if you're doing anything in the realm of health and fitness, obviously like creating a new transformation for yourself doesn't even always have to be physical, but like if I'm just feeling like off, I will, go back to like just a week of like really honing in on my healthy habits, and literally then I feel amazing and I'm like, wow, this stuff really works. It's just like that reminder. So always looking for how can we increase our certainty. On the powerhouse side of stuff, I save a folder that's just called love. If any of you have ever sent me a nice message in any way, shape, or form, if I'm having a day where like I'm just not able to come, like I forget how the impact that we're making or whatever that is, I go to the love folder. So as you start to produce results for other people, or what's cool about like a network marketing setup like with Shelly, like I'm sure you have so many other testimonials and stories that you can pull from, or with Christina with Flywheel, like there's just so many different testimonials you can pull from, even if they weren't like people you personally worked with. You can go and find certainty if we are looking for it. So I love that you said that, Liz, because certainty is kind of something we're always developing. Always, always, always. So I needed a reminder too. Anyone else? So that's actually those three things, and we can do a recap at the very end, but we have some time right now. If anyone has questions, specific questions, or even if you want to share like your takeaway, because I think it really helps cement it for everyone else in the group too, if you want to share any of that.
So my problem is always, they'll ask me like, oh, can you send me some information about Isagenix? And I'm like, yeah, sure. And I send them my cart that like I created, and then I never hear anything back. And then that's it. And I'm always like, well, how do I follow up with them?
That's good. I'm actually so glad you mentioned that, because that was something it didn't make it to my notes, from my brain to my notes. But this is more the scenario so sometimes when you ask that question, if you're like, hey, like, how does this sound? Do you want to give it a try? You ask your closing question. And then it's like, it's either a yes, no, or a maybe, which a maybe technically is usually phrased like, I want to think about it. Can you send me some information, X, Y, or Z? So a couple of things on that. And Lizzie, we'll circle back specifically like about that scenario when we connect. But in general, kind of like for everyone, if it's a like not basically like a not right now, I need to think about it, ask my dog walker, whatever, the things that people throw out there. So always, I attempt to set the follow-up time before I send the information or before I get off that phone call. So I'll be like, sure, I'm happy to send you some resources that I think you're going to love just based on our chat. When is the best time to follow up with you? I have next Monday or Tuesday available. So I always give them two options. Even if Monday and Tuesday don't work for them, it's kind of like just to get the ball rolling. And it also puts it puts an agreement between us that we're going to follow up and we're going to like revisit the conversation. Versus if I'm like, hey, yeah, I'm going to send you that email. Then, and actually, literally right now, I have a person that this is happening with. Now it's like, well, shoot. Okay, it's been like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's been this many days. Do I follow up? Do I wait another week? It like makes it so weird. And then I feel like I'm chasing them. When, think about it, if you're like, so if I'm like, hey, Lizzie, that sounds great. What's a better day to follow up with you? We'll touch base next week, Wednesday or Thursday. And you say like Wednesday. Great. Even if you no-show my call, even if like all that stuff happens, if someone's like really just not that interested right now, but at least then I can call them and it's not like weird, like, hey, Lizzie, just wanted to follow up. It's more like, hey, I'm following up as promised. Can't wait to hear what you thought about, the resources I sent over. If this time didn't work, no big deal. Text me back with a better time tomorrow that we can connect. And then you have the posture of like, hey, remember you agreed we were going to follow up or you asked me to follow up with you. So it's always helpful when you can set the next time you're going to touch base with that person before sending the information. And then, and this is always what I teach my team, is if the person gives you the runaround like, oh yeah, like maybe in 5 years, or, they're like, oh, I don't know, then no big deal. It just gives me an idea of where they are at. And they're probably just not really that seriously looking for a solution at that time. Or maybe what I shared didn't really connect with them. Maybe it's like just truly not a fit. So it lets me know how much emotional energy to invest in that rather than like, oh, I just can't wait. Like, I know Megan is going to love this. Like, I just can't wait for her to get started. And then literally it's like crickets when I try to follow up with, I'm just like looking at your faces and now Megan is like my next victim. So, but rather than me being like, oh, I'm so excited. Like Megan and I had this great chat today, but then it's almost like, when a guy doesn't call you back and you're like, well, what's happening? Like they're not calling me. If someone isn't willing, if they aren't really that interested in setting like another time to touch base, it kind of just gives us an idea that maybe right now, put them on your list of like following up every, usually I kind of do like every 2 weeks. And then if I don't hear anything at all, I'll usually say something like, hey, like, I haven't heard back from you. I've left you a couple of messages. No big deal. If this like isn't a fit for you, you can totally tell me that. Otherwise, I'll just let you reach back out to me when you're ready to pick up the conversation. And I sort of just like, keep them on we always say like put them on the love pile. Like I still like will love on them and I'm genuinely interested in their life. And so I'm not just going to stop being their friend if they aren't interested in purchasing something. But I know how much it like lets me take control of my time and my energy rather than chasing people. Did that help? So always set the next follow-up and then don't take it personally if they aren't even willing to set a follow-up, then you kind of know where they're at. But that's also where the kind of going back to having a free resource, I love, and I'm sure for a lot of our businesses having like Cindy, I know you have a community, a private Facebook community, like Shelly, I'm sure in your company, there's like private Facebook communities. I love that because then it kind of lets people just, it's like they can be a creeper. They can just sit back, they can watch what's going on, never comment, never post, but it's sort of like shows them what's possible until they're ready. And again, I never add people to groups without their permission, but that's why another reason I love having a free resource or having a community-based free resource like that. Cool. Any other questions or takeaways, comments? I know it's like as we dove into it, I'm like, oh my goodness, there's like 10 other things I could share. So this was really like scratching the surface for sure. anything else?
Sorry, I had to get off mute. So, when you're first starting a community on Facebook or, whatever it is, what is the best way to keep people engaged when it's either going slow, adding people to it, you're starting a new group with a new purpose? And so, like, at the beginning, how do you keep it going until you've built up enough people to start responding and start engaging in your posts when it's like a private ad?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And you just have to go in knowing, if you're starting something of your own, that you are going to be the most engaged one. And not let that deter you when it's been a few weeks or a few months. And I don't even know, like, Cindy, if you want to chime in on this, like when you started your Me Times 3 group, but I always tell people, like, just know it's going to be a building process. Try to think of creative ways to encourage people to engage, like doing contests or just doing little, like, post a photo, like, obviously, like, ours is health and fitness, so, like, post a sweaty workout selfie, like, we're going to pick a winner and send them an iTunes gift card. Little things like that encourage people to engage. And then the third thing I would say would be, if you have people that you're adding to the community who you really feel do resonate with the message, sometimes people just don't think of it, or they think, like, oh, this is Liz's group. This happened a lot with, like, when I started the Powerhouse community. People still call it, like, Lindsay's group. I'm like, no, like, it's, it's a community. But I get it. I get what people are saying, like, because I'm the one that's, like, the most engaged. So starting to say to people, like, hey, Liz, like, you have such an incredible story. I would love if you would chime in and share your voice a little more in this group. If you have time, again, like, not giving people a job that they don't want. But a lot of times people are like, what, me? Like, oh my God, you want me to post in your group? Like, that's amazing. So that's worked really well for us. But Cindy, what about you? Do you have anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I think 100% if you go into it knowing, for me, I view my closed Facebook group, I am not concerned at all about, at the beginning, I was not concerned at all about likes or engagement. I was just consistent. And there would be so many times when I would post and no one would even say anything. Like, no one would comment on it. No one would like it. It sounds like a silly saying, but you're looking for engagement. No one would engage it at all. But as it grew, then it, like, happened more and more. And exactly what Lindsay just said, I'll blatantly ask people, will you share that with the group? Like, someone will private message me something that is in the group, and I have no problem saying, hey, would you mind posting that in the group? I know other people would love this, or love that protein pancake that you found at Costco. Like, everyone would want to know about that deal, or your story. And people do, like, people like feeling important, and they like feeling like they have good information. So that's definitely, like, I love that advice, because I always ask people to share, and I don't think I've ever had anybody say no when it comes to sharing. And yeah, just be super consistent. I think it's just being consistent and giving good information and being funny. At least I found, like, I try to be, like, funny and not just businessy. I think, it just gives, like, a more personal touch to it. Lindsay, I know you do some of that too. Like, just make it funny and unique and different, and just keep doing it every single day, for sure.
Yeah, I'm really funny. Like,
you're hysterical.
Oh my goodness. I love that. So that's so good. Yeah. So hopefully that helps. Cool. Okay. Any final comments, questions before we wrap up?
Thank you for letting me crash your party. I appreciate it.
Yeah. No, and I know we have a lot of we have totally across the board, every kind of entrepreneur watching these on replay, etc. And it's been really fun. It's actually, it's fun to have other voices chime in. And I think, this is really what, I don't care what business we're in, but truly, like, network marketing is about collaboration. So that's what we wanted to spread some cheer in that sense. So come back next Monday if you can, everyone. I think next Monday we're talking about branding. The schedule is posted, but I will confirm that, and anyone who wants the details, I can send them out. But it's always the same Zoom link, Mondays, 8 p.m. for, I think, the next 3. This is our 3rd call, so we'll have 3 more. Okay, awesome. Well, everyone have a happy Thanksgiving and have a great night, and we'll see you back here next week. Bye.